You are good at this, better than most people know. Better, probably, than you will ever be credited for. You have learned to carry the weight without showing the strain, to answer when spoken to produce the correct expression at the correct moment, to be by every available measure, present, functioning, fine. And yet, there is a version of you that has not been fine for a very long time. Not dramatically, not in a way that earns sympathy or demands attention or gives you permission to stop, just quietly, persistently, in the way a room can be cold for so long you stop noticing the cold and start believing that cold is simply what rooms are. You have mistaken a symptom for a personality. The absence that follows achievement, you have called that realism. The feeling of watching your own days from behind glass, of being a passenger in the life registered under your name, of laughing and feeling the laugh land on nothing, you have called all of it just who you are. And there is a difference so vast, so consequential, that everything that follows depends entirely on whether you are willing to feel it. Albert Camus grew up in poverty in colonial Algeria, watching his mother, partially deaf, barely literate, unable to fully communicate with the child she loved, move through their shared life in a kind of beautiful, impenetrable silence. He did not receive the words. He received the presence. He received the silence. And he spent the rest of his life trying to understand what it means to reach toward another person, toward meaning, toward warmth, toward something, and find the reaching unreturned. He called that the absurd. And he was precise about what he meant. The absurd is not a feeling. It is not despair, not nihilism, not the dramatic conclusion that nothing matters. It is a confrontation. It is the specific, undeniable collision between the human need, desperate, constitutional, non-negotiable for meaning, for coherence, for a world that responds to us, and the universe's complete refusal to provide one. At some point, the question stops being philosophical and starts being personal. Your particular, unrepeatable life, which somehow, despite everything you have done and built and endured, still does not feel like it belongs to you. That is not a chemical imbalance asking a question. That is a soul asking a question. And the difference matters. In The Plague, Camus describes an entire city slowly going numb. The plague arrives not as catastrophe, but as accumulation, each day slightly heavier than the last, until the people of Orange stop grieving, stop raging, stop feeling the full weight of what is happening to them, because the full weight has become unlivable. They continue to function. They eat, work, speak to one another, but something essential has withdrawn. Something has gone very quiet at the center of them, and they have begun, without noticing, to organize their lives around its absence. And in the fall, the most honest thing Camus ever wrote, a man named Jean-Baptiste Clamens confesses, from a bar in Amsterdam, to a life of such perfect performance that he lost the thread back to himself entirely, successful, admired, generous in public. Then one night, on a bridge, he hears a woman fall into the water below him. He does not move. Afterwards, he cannot explain why. Not to anyone, not to himself. Only, much later, to a stranger he will never see again, in a city where no one knows his name. Camus was not writing about a bad man. He was writing about a man who had performed goodness for so long he had forgotten what it felt like to simply be. Who had constructed a life so immaculate on the outside that the inside had been quietly, completely abandoned. Do you recognize the bridge? The moment you did not move and could not explain why. Jung said this: depression is like a woman in black. If she turns up, don't shoo her away. Invite her in, offer her a seat, treat her like a respected guest, and listen to what she has to say. Not endure her, not manage her, not medicate her into silence, or outrun her with productivity, or reframe her with gratitude until she agrees to leave. Listen to what she has to say, because she is saying something. Depression is not the opposite of meaning in Jung's understanding. It is often its most insistent messenger. It is the psyche refusing, finally and completely, to pretend any longer. It is the accumulated weight of every feeling that was exiled, every need that was dismissed, every true thing that was pushed underground because the surface demanded something cleaner arriving, all at once, and sitting down in the middle of your life and refusing to leave until it has been heard. The shadow is not your darkness. That is the misunderstanding. The shadow is everything you were forced to disown. And in many people who are exceptional at functioning, at achieving, at being fine, what lives in the shadow is not cruelty or violence or the base impulses we would prefer not to have. What lives there is tenderness, grief, the part of you that needed things and was made to feel that needing was weakness, the part that wanted to be known, not admired, not useful, not impressive, just known. The part that grieved losses nobody gave you permission to grieve. The part that was angry, legitimately and rightfully angry, and learned so early and so thoroughly to swallow that anger that you no longer remember what it felt like to have a right to it. That is what is in the shadow. That is what is in the weight. Depression is not the weight killing you. Depression is the weight finally getting heavy enough that you cannot pretend it is not there. Here is the lie. You have believed it for so long it has the texture of a fact. The lie is that you do not have a legitimate reason, that your life, measured against the lives of people who have truly suffered, does not qualify, that the wound is not large enough to justify the bleeding, that other people had it worse and did not fall apart. So the falling apart says something damning about you specifically, about your weakness, your sensitivity, your fundamental inability to manage what ordinary life requires. This lie has done more damage than the original wound, because the wound could have been met. It could have been named, held, and slowly, with enough honesty and enough time, integrated into something that did not have to be hidden. But a wound you have decided you have no right to will never heal. It will only go deeper. It will only learn more sophisticated methods of concealment. It will build a persona around itself so effective, so consistently praised by the outside world, that you will eventually lose the ability to find it at all, and spend your life with the vague, unshakable sense that the person other people think you are is not the person you are, without being able to say who that other person is or where they went. In the fall, Camus says, "I had principles, of course, in the way that you have a hat, something worn, something displayed, something that has nothing to do with the interior of the head it sits upon. Your fineness is the hat. What is underneath it has not been seen in a very long time. It is exhausted. It is real. It has been waiting, with a patience that should devastate you when you finally let yourself feel it, for you to take the hat off and stay in the room with what is actually there." Camus had an answer for that too. Everyone remembers the boulder. Everyone remembers the mountain. Everyone remembers the futility, the eternal, grinding, pointless repetition of rolling and watching it fall and beginning again forever with no progress, no reward, no mercy. What almost nobody talks about is the walk back down. Camus pauses there. He stops the myth at the bottom of the mountain, in the moment between the boulder's descent and the beginning of the next ascent. And he says that is where Sisyphus is most fully himself. That is where the tragedy either breaks him or becomes his. Because in that moment, he sees everything clearly. The mountain is real. The boulder is real. The futility is real. And he chooses, in full knowledge of all of it, to turn around and walk back up. That is not optimism. Camus despised optimism. Optimism requires you to believe it will be different next time. This requires something harder, the willingness to walk towards something you know will not be different, because the walking itself is an act of refusal. A refusal to be defined by the indifference of the universe. A refusal to let the silence be the final word. A refusal, quiet, absolute, made entirely alone, to disappear. Depression tells you the walk back up is not worth it. It tells you this with great authority and with evidence that, in the moment, feels irrefutable. It is lying, not because the mountain gets smaller, not because the boulder gets lighter, but because the person choosing to walk is not the symptom. The person choosing to walk is you, the one underneath all the performance and the weight and the years of careful, exhausting concealment. That person has never once, not once, stopped being worth the walk. Jung called the process individuation. People hear that word and imagine something clean, a journey, a destination, a before and an after. It is nothing like that. Individuation is the slow, disorienting, frequently unbearable process of meeting yourself. Not the self you were permitted to be, not the self that earned the approval and the careful management of other people's comfort, but the full self, including every part that was exiled before it had a name, including the anger, the grief, the hollow where unconditional love should have been, including the needs you classified as weaknesses and the tenderness you classified as liabilities, and the longing you have been outrunning since before you were old enough to understand what you were running from. It costs the persona, the mask that has served you so well for so long, that losing it feels like losing yourself. It costs the false safety of performing fine. It costs the distance, that useful, protective, devastating distance between you and your own interior that has allowed you to function at the price of never once feeling fully alive. What it offers in return is not happiness, not peace, not the resolution you have been waiting for. What it offers is reality, the specific, irreplaceable, sometimes agonizing reality of a life that is actually yours, felt from the inside, inhabited rather than observed, lived rather than performed. A life in which the summer Camus described is not a metaphor, but an experience, not a promise, a fact, something you have carried inside you through every winter without knowing it was there. Something that does not require the cold to end before it can be felt. Something that was always there. The question is not whether you deserve to feel it. You do. You have always deserved to feel it. The question is whether you are finally willing to stop running from the only person who has ever been able to show it to you. This is not the end of the wait. There is no sentence at the end of this that lifts it. There is no insight clean enough to dissolve years of accumulated, carefully managed absence. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling another form of the forgetting, another version of the hat, another way to be fine on the outside while whatever is truest in you continues to wait in the dark for someone to come. What this is, instead, is a door left open. Camus did not survive poverty, tuberculosis, 2 world wars, and the full unblinking confrontation with a universe that offers no comfort by pretending. He survived it by looking at it directly, by refusing the consolation of false answers, by insisting, in his work, in his friendships, in the way he moved through the world, that the truth, however cold, is always more livable than the lie, however warm. Jung did not spend 60 years mapping the unconscious so that we could manage our symptoms more efficiently. He did it because he believed, with the conviction of a man who had descended into his own darkness and come back with something real, that the parts of us we have abandoned are not lost, that the self that went underground is not gone, that the depression is not the end of you, that it is, if you can bear to listen, the most honest thing about you. You have been gone for a long time. You do not have to have a plan. You do not have to feel ready. You do not have to be able to explain it to anyone who needs it explained in order to believe it is real. You only have to do one thing. Stop leaving. Come back to the room. Come back to the wait. Come back to the part of you that has been sitting in the dark waiting. Not with anger, not with accusation, but with the specific and devastating patience of something that simply refuses to stop being true. That is where it starts, not at the top. Here,